The passenger just wanted to go to the airport, but when he turned on the radio, Robert's world shook. That voice, the calm, controlled, professional voice coming from Air Traffic Control Tower. Robert knew it. 20 years ago, they had safely landed thousands of aircraft together, but then that terrible accident had happened, and his friend Mike Stevens had never gotten on the radio again. Could this man sitting in his taxi really be that lost controller? Today, I'll share with you the story of an encounter that emerged on Chicago streets and two old friends. Before the video begins, please let me know in the comments which city you're watching from, and if you believe stories like this need to be told, please subscribe. Thousands of taxis circulate on Chicago's streets, yellow vehicles that roam the city with the same routine every day, carrying people. And one of those taxis had been driven by the same man for 15 years. Robert Morrison was 58 years old, gray-haired with a calm expression, a reliable taxi driver. He worked for Chicago Cab Company, spending 12 hours a day behind the wheel, safely transporting his passengers. Customers trusted him, kind, quiet Robert who drove safely. From O'Hare Airport to downtown, from downtown to O'Hare. Routine routes, routine conversations, a routine life. Robert preferred this. Simple, uncomplicated, a life where nobody questioned the past. He lived alone in a small apartment on Chicago's South Side. He had never married, had no children. His neighbors knew him, reliable, quiet, a man who never caused problems, but nobody knew anything about his past. That Wednesday afternoon, after Robert dropped off a passenger at O'Hare, he found a new customer while waiting outside the terminal. About 55 years old, medium height, a businessman in a suit. He had a briefcase in his hand, and though tired, he had a professional air about him. "Downtown," the man said as he got into the taxi, "near Millennium Park." "Sure," Robert said, "about 45 minutes depending on traffic." The man nodded and leaned back in his seat. It was obvious he'd had a long flight. He looked tired. Robert started his taxi and set off. The first 20 minutes passed in silence. Then the passenger asked him to turn up the radio a bit. "Could you turn on the radio? I'd like to listen to the news." Robert turned on the radio. Weather reports were being given at the time, followed by air traffic conditions. At O'Hare Airport today, 347 flight operations were conducted. Air traffic controllers showed excellent coordination despite heavy traffic. Mike Patterson reporting from Control Tower. The voice coming from the radio was very professional, very calm, very controlled. "O'Hare Tower, Flight 447, you are cleared for landing on a runway 22R. Wind 270 degrees, 12 knots. Good landing." Robert's hands tightened on the steering wheel. His heart started beating rapidly. That voice, that very familiar voice. He looked at his passenger in the rear-view mirror. The man was also listening to the radio very carefully, and there was a strange expression on his face. Recognition, longing, maybe even pain. "This controller is very good," the passenger said quietly. "Very professional." Robert nodded. "Yes, O'Hare has very good controllers." "Do you have knowledge about aviation?" the passenger asked. Robert hesitated. "A little. I carry a lot of passengers to the airport. You learn." But actually, Robert knew much more, because 20 years ago, he was also an air traffic controller. The radio continued. That was Mike Patterson's report from Control Tower. Now, sports news. The passenger asked him to turn off the radio. "Thank you, that's enough." Robert turned off the radio, but his mind was still on that voice. Mike Patterson. Did he know that name? No, he didn't remember, but that voice was very familiar. "Have you lived in this city for a long time?" the passenger asked. "Yes, 15 years. I've been driving a taxi." "Did you do other work before?" Robert hesitated. "Yes, different jobs." The passenger was curious. "What kind of jobs?" "Doesn't matter. It's in the past." The passenger understood that Robert didn't want to share his past. But that voice on the radio was very familiar, as if he had heard it 20 years ago. As they approached Millennium Park, the passenger asked Robert a question. "Have you ever worked at the airport?" Robert was surprised. "Why do you ask?" "Because you seem very familiar with aviation terms. Runway, clearance. Normal taxi drivers don't know these terms." Robert realized he had made a mistake. I carry a lot of passengers. You learn. But the passenger wasn't convinced. I also worked in the aviation sector for many years. Robert's heart raced. In what position? Air traffic controller, 25 years. Robert almost hit the brakes. Really? Yes. At Midway Airport. Then I was transferred to O'Hare, but he stopped. But 20 years ago, there was an accident. A very bad accident. I quit afterward. Robert's breath caught. 20 years ago. That accident. No, this couldn't be possible. Which accident? Robert asked, tremor in his voice. The passenger was silent. Then he took a deep breath. Flight 191, 2003. Two planes almost collided. My controller friend and I prevented it at the last moment. But the stress, too much stress. Robert's world stopped. Flight 191, 2003. He remembered that night, that terrible night. Were you there that night? The passenger was surprised. Yes. Why? Robert was shaking. I was there too. What? I also worked at O'Hare Control Tower in 2003. The two men looked at each other. Suddenly, a 20-year mystery was beginning to unravel. What's your name? Robert asked. Mike Stevens. You? Robert Morrison. But back then when I was a controller, my call sign was Bob. Mike's eyes widened. Bob? Tower Bob, is that you? Yes, me. Mike was in shock. Wow, after 20 years in a taxi. Robert parked his taxi. Both were very emotional. Mike, Robert said, what happened that night? You had disappeared. I lost track of you. Mike gave a bitter smile. Breakdown. Complete breakdown. After that night, I could never get on the radio again. Me too, Robert said. PTSD. 2 planes, 400 passengers. Almost a major disaster, but we prevented it. Yes, we prevented it. But then I quit too. I started driving a taxi. The two old friends, after 20 years, had met and realized they shared the same trauma. Mike, Robert said, what do you do now? Insurance agent. Very ordinary. You? Taxi driving. Very ordinary. They both laughed. It was ironic. 2 former air traffic controllers now doing completely different jobs. Robert, Mike said, can we talk about that night? I haven't talked to anyone about it for 20 years. Of course, me neither. Robert parked his taxi in a safe place. The two men broke 20 years of silence. That night, Robert said, Flight 191 and Flight 847, they were both approaching the same runway. Yes, and there was a glitch in the radar system. The conflict alarm wasn't sounding. You noticed. You saw it first. Mike nodded. 2 blips on the radar screen very close, and I realized they were going to collide. Then what did you do? I screamed, Flight 191, immediate right turn, emergency. You also gave Flight 847 an immediate climb command. Robert remembered. Yes, Flight 847, climb immediately to 8,000 feet, emergency traffic. And they separated at the last moment. There was only a 200 feet difference. The two men sat in silence. That night, they had saved the lives of 400 passengers, but afterward, both had broken down. Robert, Mike said, how did you feel after that night? Terrible. Every night I saw those planes in my dreams. They were colliding. Passengers were dying. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. Me too. And I could never get on the radio again. I couldn't hold the microphone. It was shaking. Did you get a PTSD diagnosis? Yes. You? Me too. But treatment took a long time. 2 years of therapy, then early retirement. Mike nodded. I resigned after 1 year. I switched to another sector. The two veteran controllers were sharing their pasts. Same trauma, same pain, same decision. Quit. Mike, Robert said, did you ever regret it, that we quit? Mike thought. Sometimes. But that night, a very heavy burden was placed on our shoulders. 400 people's lives, very big responsibility. Yes, and making a mistake meant disaster. Exactly. 1 second late decision, one wrong command, they would all have died. Robert understood. That's why we quit. The risk was too high. But now I think, Mike said, maybe we made a mistake. Maybe we could have returned. Why? Because we were good. We proved it that night. In a very difficult situation, we made the right decisions. Robert thought, you're right. But back then we were very scared. Fear is normal. But burying our talents because of fear, maybe it wasn't right. The two men, for the first time in years, were talking positively about that night. Robert, Mike said, are you happy now? Driving a taxi? Mostly. Calm, simple, stress-free. But sometimes when I come to the airport, I look at the control tower and I miss it. Mike smiled. Me too. O'Hare is visible from my insurance office. I look every day. Do you miss it? A lot. That excitement, that responsibility, making decisions moment by moment. Robert understood. We both feel the same thing. Yes, and maybe it's time to talk now. We've hidden for 20 years. Robert found courage. Mike, will we meet again? Talk? Definitely. Your phone number? They exchanged numbers. After 20 years, old friends had reconnected. After that, Robert and Mike began meeting regularly. They talked about old days, analyzed that night, shared their current lives. Robert, Mike said one day, I have an idea. What is it? Maybe we can share our story with other controllers. How? PTSD awareness. Aviation PTSD is very common, but nobody talks about it. Robert liked this idea. Our experiences could be valuable. Exactly. We survived. Others can too. The two friends decided to share their story, first with small groups, then at conferences. These two controllers are very brave, said an FAA official. Sharing their story is very valuable. They're normalizing aviation PTSD, said another official. This is very important. Robert and Mike realized they had a new mission. Robert, Mike said, maybe that night we didn't just save 400 passengers. What do you mean? Maybe we were saved to live our own story, now to help others. Robert smiled. Great perspective. Months passed. Robert was still driving a taxi, but now he also gave PTSD awareness talks. Mike worked in insurance, but also did aviation safety consulting. Both had made peace with their pasts. Mike, Robert said one day, did you ever think, that voice on the radio? What voice? That day in my taxi, Mike Patterson's voice. That voice triggered you, and then everything started. Mike smiled. Yes. It was like fate bringing us together. Maybe it was. After 20 years, perfect timing. Perfect timing. Now we were ready to talk. The two friends sat watching the sunset. The past, with its pain, had been accepted. The future looked full of hope. Robert, Mike said, we made no mistake that night. I know. We're heroes. We saved 400 people. Yes, and now we're saving others too. Controllers struggling with PTSD. Yes, this is also a kind of service. This story shows us that sometimes the biggest encounters happen in the most ordinary moments. A taxi ride, a radio voice, and 20 years of silence ends. Robert and Mike had run from their trauma, but eventually that trauma made them stronger, more helpful. Real healing isn't being alone, it's sharing. And sometimes finding an old friend is the greatest therapy. So have you ever experienced such an encounter? Finding someone from your past in an unexpected place? Tell us about it in the comments.